Hello DG Lovelies, this is Nisha M, your Geek Mom, and Joe, coming to you from Diversely Geek Discusses, where we will talk about everything that makes up my geek universe, your geek universe, our geek universe, and really look at what it means to embrace your inner geek, express your inner geek, and then transform your fandom passion into positive action. I believe we are all part of one big, huge, amazing geek nation, perfectly imperfect, and I think our fandom passions really help us to learn who we are, identify, and become geek-amazing people. Welcome, join in, be part of our geek family. Hello and welcome back, DG Lovelies, to another episode of Diversely Geek Discusses. I'm Nisha M, your Geek Mom, and today I am joined by Luis Lacau from Man Bites Media.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be back on.
Woo-hoo!
Always.
Today, we're going to do something that we call, back in the Caribbean, old-blagging.
Oh.
So what that means is we're just going to be talking off the cuff. It is award season. Tonight is the very last of the awards, the Academy Awards, who are upon us, and it has been a slightly tumultuous emotional journey in terms of us as fans attaching or connecting to films. And so I thought today what we would do, and probably keep doing since we're both huge film buffs, is discussing the social and emotional imprint of film and cinematography. And then as we move along, I totally have to fit into that editing, film, and sound, because there is, without sound we lose so much.
Yeah.
Although silent films were amazing, don't get me wrong.
They were, but even them, they incorporated the fact that it wasn't sound, but it was overly acting and overly demonstrating motions with the hands to give off the emotion of sound. So technically, they still did sound. They still did sound, but without sound. That's a very interesting philosophy. Yeah.
One of the greatest
Chaplin
filmmakers, exactly. Oh my God,
Chaplin and Keaton.
All time. Chaplin and Keaton.
Both of those.
And you're talking about someone who uses the fluidity of their movement and their body and facial structure to portray ripples of sound.
Yeah, that scene with Buster Keaton on the train, and he sees the general, it's called, and he sees the block that's in the middle of the train tracks, and he's freaking out. His eyeballs expand, and then he's like, what am I gonna do? And he waves his hands around and does all this thing, and then he jumps out of the caboose, and he gets in front of it, and then he's like, I'm not going to be able to get down. How am I going to get down and throw the block away? So he's kind of scratching his head and giving you the impressions of what would be going on in his head by his movements of his hands and everything. And then he hits it with something and boom, it flies onto him. And then he sees another one and he's freaking out. And then he does that. But you feel everything in the scene. And you hear the train going. You hear all this stuff. And none of that is portrayed in the film. But you hear it in your head because of the way that the actor does it. Yeah.
Because
it's brilliant.
They create, and that's cinematography.
Yes.
They create.
And editing.
Oh, exactly. And I said that, didn't I? Cinematography and editing. But okay. So I guess that's going to be in this show too. Okay. And the show tunes that come with them. The honest truth, you cannot extract any of the four elements that we're discussing today, because without any of them, you just don't have a complete visual story.
Yes.
And that's what filmmaking and cinematography is. It's visual storytelling. It's storytelling. It's world building. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Yeah.
So, as a filmmaker and having studied it and worked in the industry, you talk to me often about how important it is in the directing and the producing to put something out there that people can then connect to and physically, almost tangibly can touch.
Yeah. There's a scene the first scene that pops into my head when you say cinematography and how it impacts a person and how it impacts a person's emotions just from a still shot, because that's literally what this is a still shot. A Clockwork Orange in the scene underneath the bridge where he is about to start beating relentlessly this homeless person. He stops, and the camera focus is in on his face with the completely soft blue background, and all you see is Alex DeLarge's eye and his little smirk across his face, and he just goes, "I'm not listening to a..." He doesn't say this, but he portrays so many different emotions, and you fall in line with the character just because of what Stanley Kubrick did. He put you in the most uncomfortable position.
Yeah.
He didn't put you far away from this scene.
No,
how it starts, he puts you right in the front of this person that's about to commit these horrible acts. And he doesn't allow you to deter yourself from the scene. He goes close. And then he pulls away for the action. That way you see everything. And you know everything that's going on. And every action that all these despicable 4 characters are doing. And then it builds further with each of those scenes. And each of those scenes are so perfectly spread out. And Stanley Kubrick is one of those masterful directors that every scene in a film is laid out in a way on purpose. There's not a single aspect of a set, a scene, a shot. Everything is done according to Stanley Kubrick's explicit instructions. And there's many cinematographers like that. In Lawrence of Arabia, same thing happens. Even to the effect of doing these massive battle sequences.
Yep.
And he does the same thing. And it's incredible seeing these beautiful scapes of cinematography. You're talking about going from uber, epic pictures to something close into somebody's face. Mm-hmm. And then you have other filmmakers like Scorsese, that it's not about just the cinematography. It's about the music that portrays in the film. And all these different aspects building together to give you these impeccable moments in your life. And you fall for these characters. And you fall completely in line with these characters. And you're like, whoa, what am I lose myself in these films. And that's what the whole purpose is. The filmmaker is literally manipulating your mind every time you step into that cinema and you see these movies. And that's just masterful. Every time I see that, it just blows my mind.
So, I mean, we're looking, and then so I'm not a huge Kubrick fan. I know you know that, and it's not because of his work or the wealth of his skill. It's subject matter, and it's not a subject. Guys, I'm sitting here, and if you could see my face, you'd know I'm cringing, because Lewis is quite aware that I am a visual learner, and I have a strong visual memory. When you're looking at film that incorporates the critical elements and nuances of sound editing, but with the visual scape, something I've spoken to you about a lot, where you're looking at a sweeping scape versus sound attached to the scape, but then you have color attached to it as well. Let me go to something. Let's look at animation. The Lion King. In the moment where Simba is lifted, and you've got a full 360-degree scape that is given to us through the graphic design, and then the movement and the flow of that. But then you also get something like you would in Interstellar, where he is now in the boxes, where he goes into the sixth dimension, and he's in the boxes, and then we're also going through sweeping scape, but we're going through black and whites and grays, but sound.
Yeah.
You put those things together, and now me, as a human, my emotions are now connected to that moment. My emotions are connected because I can feel passion, compassion, empathy. I can feel fear. I can feel the anxiety.
Yeah.
I can feel the hope that comes with, oh my God, is he going to push past it and realize that the room's on the other side of that wall? That's the brilliance of what good filmmaking, cinematography can bring to you. And it doesn't matter, I guess, the medium of film, right? I mean,
I could show you. I could draw a parallel, and this is a lot of people are going to be like, "This is a stretch," but no, it actually is, and I'll explain to you why. From The Lion King to Clockwork Orange, that scene that you just explained, doing that 360 shot, showing everything around, and then going in close up to the characters. What does that do to you? That builds you and makes you go into that character.
That's correct.
And then the opening shot of A Clockwork Orange is not a static shot. It's a pan out from the character. And then it jumps into that scene where it's a close-up of the character's face. So you are literally implanted into that character's role.
I feel that those are the type of films that are meant to have a largesse to them in terms of who we are as a humanity. So they're looking at a social scape and a communal perspective on what that story arc is and the world building is there. So successful, larger scale films want to tell you this bigger story. But then when you want to have something like The Wizard of Oz and we are honing in on Dorothy with Toto in the basket while she's on the bike, and we're not seeing her. She's moving. We know she's moving, but we're seeing Toto in the witch's basket. It's a specific message that is being sent to us in that moment, because you're getting the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And if you saw me, you'd see me bouncing up and down because the bike is bouncing up and down. Remember? And you're seeing her feet pedaling.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
The thing is with that, is the great thing about that, and we just spanned 3 decades of film.
Yeah.
Okay, we just spanned three different generations of filmmakers. All right, because of the limitations of each of those directors, they're only able to do certain things, and that is another masterful aspect. Is these directors, especially in The Wizard of Oz, they had these bulky cameras that were literally the size of like full-size desks. Each of those cameras, and you're talking about they weigh as much as a car, so they weren't able to go just handheld.
They were on those huge
dolly
lifts. Yeah.
So they were literally these massive cameras. So when you see these type of films, especially in the 40s and 50s, you're like, they're so static. They're so like there's no motion or anything. That's why they do the dolly shots and all that. It's very static shots. The cameras weigh a ton, so yeah, they ain't moving anywhere. They ain't carrying those things on their shoulders. That's for sure.
Yeah, but look at how well he used sound and the movement of the legs and the basket and everything to portray the pure fear of that moment of what could happen.
And the person that started that was Alfred Hitchcock.
Of course it was.
Alfred Hitchcock doing those. Well, besides German cinema, which is where Alfred Hitchcock got his influence from. You're talking about you're talking about Metropolis, all these films in German cinema that were basically the basic building blocks for everything that we know from the 50s all the way up to the 70s and 80s. And these guys were doing it in the 30s. But Alfred Hitchcock, he grew from the German movement, and he drew that and built the characters based off of Nosferatu. That you fall into these characters and you see the life of these characters, not just this glamorous, prissy, Hollywood-ized films like we recognize from the 50s and 60s and all that stuff. You see films like Sullivan Travels. You see films from Alfred Hitchcock that came out, that they're true life representations of that. And then with the French cinema, that's where everything, it was, you got movies that came out of that generation, like Blowout, the Michelangelo Angelini film that is beautifully shot, and it's about this photographer, still life photographer, and he's just going out and taking pictures of these people, but you feel what that person is doing. Bicycle Thief, you actually feel that these characters are real, grittiness, that rawness of it. And that changed the cinemascope so much because of the realism that was introduced in the French New Wave. And then we got movies like Taxi Driver, like Clockwork Orange, that exploited the really out there culture, the really dark, really It's the hard part of humanity.
That's where they really started to explore the psyche and the psychology and the emotional behavior, and really test the limits of what we would accept as behaviorally classic versus behaviorally abhorrent. And I saw that was something that happened very strongly in the late 60s, 70s, is where we really started to see that type of exploration. We can certainly put some of that down to the fact that we had a growing populace of drug use at the time,
yes,
for sure. And so we had entertainers, filmmakers, cinematographers, writers using those things, and they influenced the process, right?
Yeah. They pushed the envelope a lot of times. Perfect example of that, the 2001.
Just sorry, I was going to say the Beatles.
Well, besides the Beatles, yeah. I mean, the Beatles even got into filmmaking.
Yes, they
did. With a lot of aspects. They were going to do the animated Lord of the Rings series, and Ralph Bakshi took it from them. But they were going to get involved in that. They were going to make that, and most of the funding and the story of Lord of the Rings, the Ralph Bakshi, came from the script that the Beatles wrote. So if it wasn't for them bringing it to the forefront and showing how much people would be interested in doing it, it wouldn't have gotten made.
And Ralph Bakshi's version of Lord of the Rings is psychedelic.
It's dark,
to say the least. Okay, so I actually encourage people to see it, but just be prepared, because for when it was created, it was very dark. So and it's very you have fear.
Oh, yeah.
You're sitting in a pocket of fear very often through it. So
it's heavy trauma.
Very heavy trauma.
Yeah.
And this is an animated series.
Yeah.
So again, now I'm going back, because this is the third time we're bringing in animation and showing that there's realism behind animation.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Just depends on the breadth of the directorship or the screenwriting. I guess that, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to have the conversation is, I know that we have concerns because we, as the film viewers and as the audience, and we're the consumers, so you would think that the consumers, in a sense, would have a wider influence in terms of what we consider to be the best films and why they're the best films. But I know that, of course, that the academies, that they all have their own wherewithal for their criteria. Do you think that that's outdated at this point in terms of because film is leaving such a huge imprint?
I think that they need to make it more accessible too, because this is the big difference that people don't realize. This is the Academy Awards is supposed to be the filmmaking community coming together and voting for what they think technically, and I mean technically in the literal sense, technical aspects of the film are portrayed the best. And that's why there's so much hype and kind of controversy with the snubs and all that stuff. It's like they're going for the technical aspect. A lot of times they haven't been doing that in the last 10 years. And that's what's causing the controversy, because they're not going by the technical.
I guess you're confusing the consumer.
Exactly.
Because we don't know what criteria you're using.
Before, it was always the films that mattered the most and that got the most representation by the studio, because unfortunately not everybody could see all 480 movies that come out in 1 year. Most people watch maybe 20 to 30 movies a year.
That's a pretty normal consumption.
I'm the unusual one that watches 400 plus.
That's because you use a lot of streaming mediums and you find other ways as well to be able to watch it. Plus, it's what you do. If I see 20 to 30 in the theaters, when you look at 365 days out of a year, that's actually a lot of consumption.
Yeah. So,
what do they have? So, yes, I guess to some extent, then the criterias or the academies are to some extent they are outdated, because I don't feel like they're tapping into the social relevance of social media, and the fact that we are universally connected through social media, and so therefore our not influence, our opinions actually should have a higher.
We don't have an outlet for our opinion as a consumer. Mm-mm. And that's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
It's the Golden Globes is the closest that we have to as an outlet of a consumer giving representation to films of the previous year. That's the closest. And even that is a horrible representation of it.
Yeah, because that doesn't really take into
It
account
does not.
the normal consumer.
There's no award show that technically goes into the actual aspect of the consumer themselves getting a voice. The closest that we had was the MTV Viewers' Choice Award back in the day. And that was when MTV was a huge corporation enough that they would actually make a difference. Now it's fallen to the wayside and doesn't give that much.
We can't get that much credence from that.
Yeah.
Well, we do have the People's Choice, but even that is, I think, very, very superficial, unfortunately.
It really is.
And I think they'd probably like to be more than what they are, but they're not. And that's okay. Again, that's another conversation.
But the Academy Awards is like the Super Bowl. You're
Yeah.
watching it because of the technical aspect, and truly, it's supposed to be a love letter to filmmakers and people that are aspiring to be filmmakers or really love the genres that films are made in, and that's what it's supposed to be directed to. It's not a direct-to-consumer thing. And that's where people get that misconception because it changed in the 2000s and it changed to a consumer product now. And that's where it's made to be this grandiose thing. But technically, this is supposed to be for the people that love. And by love, I mean that are watching 200, 300, 400 movies a year. The people that really love film. That this is their number one passion in life. That's where it's directed towards. And lately, the Academy Awards, and I'm talking about last 10 to 15 years, they've been confused. They've been so confused because they don't know which way they want to go. They want to get the viewership from the audiences, but at the same time, they're not staying true to themselves.
Well, I think in the long run, we are having a really good... I think we're starting to have a dialogue. I was going to say we're having it, and I'm going to say, no, I'll take that back. We're starting to have the dialogue to where they're looking at what terminologies means and how that will then imprint on the film industry in general. We are looking at diversity. But you and I understand diversity is so much wider than just one thing, two things. It's probably a million points of influence.
And you won't have diversity until you truly have them seeing things without forcing themselves to see things.
That's yeah.
Because if they're forcing themselves to see it, then they're putting that film as a priority, and that in itself is a form of racism and a form of exclusion.
Well, I don't believe in exclusionism, of course.
And that's what it's doing, though, because people are like they're going to the opposite extreme.
Right, but exclusionism, and you and I will have banter on this quite a bit, my friend, being that we run an organization that constantly tries to look at the definition of understanding of diversity and exclusionism and inclusiveness. It's not, again, I'm going to go back to the origins of what the show is supposed to be about today. It's supposed to be about the imprint. Film, literature, art in general is about leaving an imprint on our souls. It's supposed to lasso us in, wrangle us in, and then leave something inside of us that hopefully leaves us better for it. You are in love with Clockwork Orange. It's not something I believe in because I don't believe in the message.
Yeah.
But the impact and the influence of that has changed you as a person. That imprint and social and literally conscience-changing influence is so critical to who you are as a person. So in that same way, can't we look at other films and say, well, you know what? That could be conscience-changing for someone else. That could be because we don't know. We can't see someone else's journey, right?
Correct.
So
that's what makes film so subjective.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the problem. Yeah, you could have an award show for it, but you have to focus in on the technical side. So you gotta run it very mechanical. And that's where people see is that it's kind of detached from human emotion. A lot of the Academy Award people. Yeah. And that's the problem. They have to detach themselves because it's a technical award. So people don't get that, though, about the Academy Award. They think that it's this grandiose event and it's for the people. No, it's for the filmmakers. And that's the difference. It's a technical award.
That's why, again, we're having the conversation because to be able to know the difference between the two things. But
and he hopes for possibly having representation in a People's Choice Award type of thing.
Yeah.
Because that would make the most sense.
I know we were talking about films over the last how many years? Well, for us it could be anything, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of tapped into a film that, and you and I have never discussed this film, but I am East Indian Caribbean woman who was raised in New York, so of course I have a strong cultural influence. So a film like Slumdog Millionaire, which for me was breaking down barriers in terms of being one of the very few foreign films to literally gravitate into the normative status quo of film, and bringing us a story that was true. It's a real story. It's not like one that's a stretch, because the honest truth was it was a story that could exist in India. What do you feel about something like that? I mean, I hold it very dear to me in terms of...
Slumdog Millionaire was a brilliant film. The way that and this is...
I'm
completely detaching myself as emotion-wise, because I really enjoy the film emotionally as well, but technically, the film is well done. It is incredibly well done. And the way that the filmmaker handles the subject matter, handles the actual cinematography of it was glorious. The editing of this film was fantastic. The pacing in this film was really good. It was really on point. The reason it won Best Picture is because it has all those aspects.
Technical aspects of it. Do you know what it would take if you closed your eyes and you had ever walked through India in your existence? People like us who had watched that film and closed our eyes and thought about India, and what it was to take that reality, translate it to film in a way that was so free-flowing and so fluid, but at the same time that literally grabbed at our heart, and then to take it and show it to the rest of the world, and then for the rest of the world to understand it.
Yeah.
Do you know, that influence, I could cry because of how important it was in terms of supporting an industry that's the largest industry in all of film, which is the Indian filmmaking industry.
Yeah. Bollywood is amazing, and Bollywood films are fantastic. And I don't know if you know this, but I love a lot of the Bollywood films, especially the real, the gritty, the new wave Bollywood films.
New wave Bollywood film, thank
goodness.
Those
are glorious, and those are amazing. And that when you said that, I was like, yes, I love the fact that this film grabs those aspects of the realistic Bollywood films and takes it and makes it Americanized and for an American market, and it does it in a way that translates well. And if it wasn't for this film, I wouldn't have gone to Bollywood films, because that was my introduction to Bollywood. I watched this film.
It was for a lot of people. It's not actually Americanized. I'll just step back on that just a little bit, because to be fair, very little of it is adjusted to be palatable. Because remember that it's the story of this young boy who's on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and has answering these questions, and then you were hearing his story.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. Of course, that's grandiose, duh. But I mean, you have Amitabh Bachchan. Come on, it's like the grandfather of Indian film. I'm stepping again into foreign film, and the fact that a lot of times as consumers we're not giving ourselves that opportunity to taste things that will change us.
Oh yeah,
will change who we are.
And the thing is that we get a lot of representation here of European culture, but not much of Asian, and that's a shame, because let me tell you, there's some fantastic Asian films. You want to go into amazing in the last 10 years. Old Boy, a Korean film. What do you call it? You want to Slumdog Millionaire. I mean,
Kung Fu Hustle, one of the most brilliant films I've ever seen in my existence.
Isn't it American?
No, it's technically an Asian film.
Is it?
Kung Fu Hustle.
Huh. Okay. And then, I mean, there's so many films. And if you really want to go to my passion is Akira Kurosawa. Kurosawa films are amazing. Like from Seven Samurai to Hidden Fortress, which is basis for Star Wars. I mean, there's so many different influences that we had from Asian cinema, and especially what do you call it? Especially Asian cinema, because European cinema, yeah, it was a lot of stuff, but yes, IP Man. Thank you. Yes, that was the one that I was thinking of. I couldn't think
I
of
was
the
just
name.
pulling it out for him because I'm like, you cannot have this conversation without Ip Man being somewhere in there, because it is the story of the historic background of Bruce Lee and fundamentally martial arts films and the way that we know it. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and I mean that was a perfect segue. The other thing that brought in culture, not only the what do you call it, the fact that Bruce Lee, the way that he came over was through cinema. And what did he bring with him? He changed the culture of martial arts when he came to us.
To where it was significantly relevant to us.
This film wasn't
something we wanted.
His films didn't just do that. They weren't just films. They changed a culture. Mm-hmm. And then Jackie Chan years later as what do you call it, stunt coordinator and an actual stunt actor, going into directing, acting, all this stuff in American cinema, and that put the way for Ip Man. It put the way for oh my god, I'm blanking out on this film and it's driving me nuts.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon?
No, it's
because that is still one of the most beautiful films that's ever been created.
Yes, it is.
My god.
And the music, again, it goes back to the music. It goes back to all those things. And it's just, there's something about it that cinema has redefined itself so many different times. And people don't allow themselves to embrace other cultures and embrace other films. Last Emperor, for one, Bernardo Bertolucci's masterpiece. This film was glorious. And I still cannot remember the name of the stupid movie that I'm trying to figure out.
Tell me who's in it and I'll let you know.
It's no name actor. It's oh, good grief.
It's okay.
It's one of the islands in Asia. I can't remember. But anyways, yes, it's definitely one of those topics that people don't go into, and they don't see the relevance of these films, and that's a sin. It's a sin.
I'm showing him a list of the 150 top Asian films so he can scroll through them. And
Battle Royale, yes.
And surprisingly or not, I actually have watched a good amount of these films because I'm a very strong, passionate follower of Asian film. But I like Asian cinematography. I'm just calling it that because I could probably be saying it incorrectly. Because I believe that they also give a landscape to film. Not the cheesy ones, right? But the ones that have a purpose to them. I believe they give a landscape to film that is very hyper-focused on singular movement. Have you ever noticed in these films that they, exactly what you're talking about Stanley Kubrick doing,
yes,
but that they'll give extreme credence to the movement of insects, or to the movement of water and then the insects behind it, and then to the movement of water, the insects, and then the air as it's the wind as it's blowing, to be able to tell you passage of time, to be able to tell you, that your thoughts are supposed to move with this action, and it's all based on nature.
Yes, it is.
It's what is that called? I know that there's a name for that where where nature is that you use as a representation for movement of time and conscience and thought.
Symbolism. I mean, I would say
just
symbolism, but I can't think of the technical name for it. But the film that I was thinking about was The Raid Redemption.
The Raid Redemption,
which is a glorious film. And if you've never seen The Raid Redemption, oh my god, please do. That is probably one of the most amazing masterpieces of martial arts mixed with action, mixed with raw, just action filmmaking. I mean, this film, it goes from 0 to 100, and it doesn't go down from 90 the whole film. It's literally a sheer action film from moment 1 to 90, and there's no drop. whatsoever. And it is a glorious story. It's if you've ever seen the new Judge Dredd, it is basically an Asian version of that, and with just probably one of the most outrageous stunts.
That film won a lot.
Oh yes,
acclaim.
Yeah,
all throughout Europe, actually.
Yeah, and one of the most poignant scenes in that is a scene where the the actual actor himself, he does a stunt where he goes through a car window, the back car window, and he goes through it, and then he comes out the other side in the middle of a sequence, trying to avoid the car from hitting him. So he goes through the window, comes out the other window, but the camera cuts to inside the car, and the camera is actually the person in the front seat dressed as the front seat with the camera pointing that way.
That's ridiculous.
And you cannot tell.
Oh my gosh.
You cannot tell. And then the camera actually it does a pan like this, and it follows the motion of the guy coming through the window and out to the other one. So it doesn't stop. And the way they did that is by him disguising himself as a car seat. So it is just a glorious film, and the film it stretches the legs of any type of stunt coordinators, any type of stunts that you've ever seen in real life. These guys,
I'm gonna have to find that one and put it up there. It is a sequel, right? The Raid is the original, and then the Raid.
Which the Raid is a fantastic film too. They're both dubbed, and there's no original dialogue anymore. Film. They're completely dubbed, and that's the only ones that you're able to get now. But don't let that hold you back. You get past that a little bit, and it is very hard to get past. But once you do, it is an enjoyable film.
Oh, I grew up watching martial arts films, and of course I probably bought into the status quo. Sorry about that. So I've never had an issue with watching dubbed films. Plus, I am Indian. Yeah. And there are 108, if not more, languages throughout the East Asian continent. And for us to watch Bollywood features or classic features, we have to be able to go with dubbing. Yeah. So that's not part of the consciousness of the Western culture of film and cinematography, because we're very used to being able to just listen to our films in English and then turn on our closed captioning. But what you need to know, when we're going to go back to sound and editing, when you have an original film that's filmed in its own language, with its own sound abstracts and compositions, when you translate it over to English, you're actually losing.
A lot.
You're losing quite a lot.
One of those stories that I have to say is Y Tu Mamá También. It's an amazing movie, and if you know Spanish, you lose so much in the translation. So much. Because there's so much more to that story, and the English translation, it loses a lot. And you're like, I know Spanish, so then when I'm watching it, I put the subtitles just because, whatever. I want to put the subtitles in English and see what they lose. And it takes so many things out of context.
It's the nuance of the phrasing and the structure of the phrasing. So it's the same thing if we're watching in
it's a slang.
A South Indian film or a North Indian film. It's actually two completely different things because of the terminologies and the slang. But then again, it's also because of the landscape of the directorship, which is indelible to the culture of the filmmaker, and to the culture of the film and the story composition and the screenplay. So, again, I'm going to sweep us right back here again. We're back in award seasons. A lot of times, how difficult is it then for an awards academy to really, truly give accolades appropriately to a film when maybe they don't know the scape, as you said, it's translation.
And that's why I think that there's moments that you see the Academy making, not mistakes per se, but over exaggerating the importance of a film. Perfect example this year, Roma. They kind of they're giving the representation to the film for a particular reason, for a political purpose.
Well, we don't know that.
Well,
it's in your opinion.
Yes, in my opinion.
I'm just trying to be very balanced on this.
The film is fantastic. It's really good.
So Alfonso Cuarón, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, Y Tu Mamá También. It's like he's really good, but what do you call it? It's a matter of just it's not Academy Award. It's not up to that level, I think, in my opinion. Again,
but again, are they looking at the technicality of the filming, which is quite brilliant, and I do agree with that. However, is that what they're looking at in order to tell that story, or could that story?
It could be told
been told differently.
It could be told differently.
And again, it was not ours to tell. It's his story. It's his personal recount of something that was part of his life.
Correct.
So for him to tell it like it did, it makes sense.
And it's a brilliant film, and I'm not going to take away from it. It's just, it doesn't... I don't agree with the fact that it is getting as much accolades as it is. And
that's okay. Like, you and I have had our discussions. I'm not going to reveal how I feel about everything. I am a very strong proponent for recognition of the technical influence and cultural influence of Black Panther for a lot of reasons, whereas maybe the acting in some parts is beautiful. It certainly doesn't hold up to acting in other places. But I'm not saying don't recognize it, because it has its place. Everything has its place. Now, I'm just going to jump in with the last film we're going to talk about, because I think our time is running down and we'll probably do this forever. And we're going to go into A Quiet Place very quickly. A film which both of us feel should have, without a question,
there's no way I could stay quiet.
Been so much more recognized. Actually, recognized at all. Thank you very much.
Well, I got recognized for one thing, sound.
Yeah, of course. Good God, how could it not?
Right. This film is everything that the Academy Awards should recognize a film for.
Yes.
This is a first-time filmmaker, first of all.
Yes.
First-time director.
Yep.
That is directing not only a child, but a child with an actual disability.
Yes, correct.
And representing the disability with, in my opinion, and from what I've been told from friends, in an appropriate way. Mm-hmm. And again, this is my opinion, and this is from what I've been told. I don't have a hearing impairment or anything as such, but so I cannot tell you 100%. But yes, it does that in such a way that it doesn't take away from the film. It doesn't do a spotlight on that aspect of the film. He's not doing that. He's doing it for the right reasons, because this character plays an important part in the film.
Good God, yes.
With that disability. And it's part of the story. It's built into the story for a reason. And I love that, because that's true representation. That's representation where it should be.
The brilliance of Krasinski to realize that he would write a story where we live in a world where we make sound, we die, mm-hmm. and where he has a child, spoilers, and lots of them, people, sorry about that, where he has a child who has a hearing impairment to that level where the father is just besides himself to try and create a hearing device apparatus for her to be able to hear. But then look at that story and mm-hmm. what the outcome of it is.
And it's incredible. It really is. And it portrays a family in an appropriate way, and in a way that's realistic. Because that family feels real. They have their flaws. They have their moments where they're arguing with each other. They have their real moments of a relationship, real moments of life being together in a world like that. And then they do it in a way that's suspenseful. Because, let me tell you, some of those scenes are white-knuckle scenes.
Yeah, they are.
And you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And the tension building, going back to doing that same thing where it closes up to a person.
Yes.
You open up the film with close-ups of all the family. And then you build off of that. And little by little throughout the film, the camera goes away from the characters rather than going into the characters.
You get to see the world that they're building. And you realize that there's such starkness in that beauty, and that there's so much, oh my God, it's so
there's
much
so many
fair
levels.
And so much everything.
There's so many levels to this film. It's like an onion that you keep peeling back and peeling back and peeling back, and you see new things every time you watch it. The film, it develops not only with you, but the family develops with the film.
That's right.
And the film, it focuses in, and it's close-ups at the beginning, and then it builds these wider shots as the family is exploring the world and has a wider point of view of the world. And it's what everything about filmmaking
That's
that
right.
is important, that is powerful. It's entertaining. It's technically beautiful. It's real.
It's scary.
It's raw. And it's
painful. It's painful. It's painful. I use that word very loose. It's true. You will hurt. You will cry. Your stomach will turn. And it's not because it's horrible. It's not horror in that sense. It's because
suspense.
The suspense, and all you want to do is save them, and you can't. So it's the epitome, I think, of what I go to see a film for.
Yeah.
And yet you and I know that this film will probably could and should leave an imprint, a social and a cultural influence. I actually feel I'm not a film student, but I would love to study this film to understand.
You want to talk about accolades for a director. Best director, what should it be? A person that showed an excellence, a mastering of the craft. This is his first feature film.
Yep.
He's a comedy actor.
Yep.
He went from a comedy actor to director, and directing this film.
And co-writing this film.
But just as a director aspect, that is an achievement in directing.
Yeah.
That is the people, those are the people
it.
that should be nominated. Why wasn't Peter Jackson nominated for the first and second? Because they were going to nominate him for the third, and they knew that. Because it was an award for all three of the Lord of the Rings films.
Right.
Because that's what he was doing. He wasn't directing one film. He was directing all three at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So why would they give it to him for each film? They gave it to him as the last one because that was encompassing of all his films.
And all 11 Academy Awards with it. Because all 11 Academy Awards were highlighting and recognizing 3 films worth of movement.
And each of those films won 7 to 8 Academy Awards.
Of their own.
Yeah.
So, I guess, as we wrap, because this is a great conversation, and we could just keep going on it.
Yes, we can.
I think that, I'm sitting in a room full with my posters and my pictures and my memorabilia, because these things that are around me have connected to me. They've created they create the blueprint of who I am as a person. And when you indulge in literature, art, film, cinematography, television, anything that has to do with the arts, your entire being is affected. It's influenced and it's reshaped. And that, by the way, is my hands up to the fact that we need to support the arts. We need to fund the arts. We need to sponsor funding of the arts across all mediums. Because you take arts out of our world and our world will be stark.
Yeah. Follow Kickstarter. Follow the different programs that are launching all these things and be part of the movement.
That's it.
Don't just ignore it. Don't just sit idly by, because guess what? You can make that difference if you go out and you step onto those websites, step onto those platforms, and sponsor those people. And it doesn't need to be anything outrageous.
No.
You do $10,
Sponsor
$20. That's it.
Sponsor someone's dream, because we all have the ability to get something on that screen one day that can change someone else's life.
Yeah.
And I wrote today in my little article that, hello lovelies, it's time for the Academy Awards 2019. This year's film industry has brought us diverse, emotionally and socially relevant offerings. While we have been entertained, we've also cited, hoped, feared, imagined, and straight up enjoyed every moment. Often when we watch a film, we are drawn in. We connect to a moment, to feelings and sounds that touch us, lassos our souls, and that hope we have deep within who we are. That's the beauty of film, of the written story. It takes our hearts and it helps us wear them proudly as we find our own stories in their stories. To find a way to step outside of our own fears and maybe even break the chains that bind us. Films like Black Panther, The Green Book, The Favorite, Roma, Star is Born, Bohemian Rhapsody, A Quiet Place, If Beale Street Could Talk, and just hundreds more, they change our language, our collective relating. They tell us the opportunity we have today came from someone's struggle. The dream we pursue was drawn by the artistry of imagination. And they show us that anything, and I mean literally anything, Lewis, is possible positively when we believe in our own strength and potential.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
So that's us as we head into the Academy Awards viewing and see what happens. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today for a really beautiful conversation. And I'm really hoping that we continue to have it. And
if I may,
yes,
just before we close out, watch the Academy Awards, enjoy it. This is our Super Bowl, guys. This is anybody that's a true fan of all things film. This is our Super Bowl, and do it. Take it as that. This is a bunch of films competing for accolades in a certain subject, and enjoy what the filmmakers have to say about their film. Enjoy them getting the recognition sometimes they deserve. And whether it's your opinion or not, that's somebody's opinion.
Yeah, it's okay because
somebody's opinion.
It's about learning.
And again, it's subjective.
Yes.
So everybody's going to have a different feel to it. So take it with a grain of salt and enjoy the experience of having these directors talk.
Exactly. So thank you for joining us here at Diversely Geek Discusses, where today we discuss the social and emotional imprint of film, cinematography, editing, and film sound. Because, well, we couldn't take those two out. Impossible! And we talked a little bit about the influences and what we're missing in terms of looking at universal film offerings. And we highly recommend that everyone go out there and give a watch to what's been nominated in terms of foreign films. And follow your local film festivals, the Sundance Film Festivals, etc., because you're going to find offerings there that you're never going to get in your on your everyday
check
movie
out the
theater.
Documentaries that come out of Sundance.
Okay, so yeah, I know. I mean, that's going to be another conversation because that is something I think we're looking at doing. Is Diversely Geek going to Sundance? We do have the opportunity to do that in the next year or so. So I'm hoping that we will be on the road for one of those, and we'll hopefully come to you guys live with that. So again, this is Nisha M, your geek mom, and
Lewis from Man Bites Media.
And you can tell us how we can find your work?
On manbitesfilm.com. You can see all our stuff on there.
Yay! And you can find us, diverselygeek.org. Our podcast, which you will hear on iTunes, Alexa, Google Play, Spotify, amongst many other places. And you can find us on all our social media sites. And tonight usually I do some live tweeting during the award season. So tune in to our Twitter account or Facebook account so you could see what we're doing. All right, everyone. Love to all of you, and we will see you again next week. Have a great one.